Welcome, everybody, to another episode of The Current Status. I am one of your co-hosts, Pumla Schmidt, also known as Exchange Goddess on the Twitters and other social media platforms. And I'm joined today by my lovely other co-hosts. Teresa, want to intro yourself?
Yeah, hello, everyone. Excited to be back. My name is Teresa Miller, and you can find me on Twitter as @24/7 IT Connect.
Hi, everyone. My name is Holly Lehman, and I am a program manager at Microsoft. Typically, I don't throw that out, but today it is very applicable because as I get ready to introduce our guest, we got to meet because I have the privilege of running the North Star Partner Program for Azure API, Azure Product Improvement Team for customer experience. And I get to work with a ton of very cool, very impressive, very technical fellows in our partner ecosystem. And one of those partners that I get to work with is Intercept out of Belgium. And Wesley, who is joining us today, gets stuck hanging out with me twice a month talking tech and all the fun things he's working on. So Wesley, thank you for coming onto the show today. I am so excited to share your story, what Intercept does, and what you are currently working on. So if you want to intro yourself and talk about Intercept, that would be awesome.
Wait. Before Wesley, before you start.
Oh, sorry.
You're from Belgium. Do you have chocolate for us?
Yeah, I'm not. I have to correct you on that one. It's the Netherlands.
Oh, Netherlands. I was wrong. Netherlands.
But
it's true waffles.
Good, but I still prefer Swiss chocolate. So if you had Belgian chocolate for me, we could do like a little war, but next time, right?
Well, I definitely, whenever there is no COVID and I go to Belgium, chocolate is one of the first things I actually buy. It's the good stuff.
As I really interrupted you, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Wesley. I work at Intercept as an Azure architect, and I'm also an Azure MVP. And what we do at Intercept is we focus on software companies. So what we do is actually bring software companies from an on-prem or data center scenario to Microsoft Azure. And we go through the whole migration part. We can do a lift and shift, we can do the modernization, but basically what our work focuses on is identifying the workloads. So one can be refactoring, one can be re-architecting, rebuilding, or just a lift and shift. And what we think we're great at, and we have a lot of happy customers, so I think we are actually great at that, is not only bringing them to Azure, but do that whole managed service business. So we look into continuous improvement. And that's where the challenge is for software companies. They have a product they've written many, many years ago. It's not just startups, it's companies that started 20, 30 years ago, and now they want to move to the cloud. So you actually have to bring that legacy application to Azure. And that's what makes us stand out, I think, personally, because we don't just do the lift and shift, we then focus on continuously improving that environment and integrating new Azure features. So from that VM, we go to platform as a service, we go to serverless, we go to IoT, AI. That's what we do every day. And I'm happy to be joined by a wonderful team that is very passionate, and that makes it work. It makes you happy to get up in the morning and start working with your colleagues.
That's awesome.
So I have to say, you have some really amazing colleagues. And what I think is so interesting about the team that you work with, and what I wanted to chat with you about, is how you're constantly staying up to date on the latest and greatest Azure technology. So each one of you are really focused on a certain area. So why don't you talk about how the team is structured and how you stay up to date as Azure is ever changing so rapidly?
Yeah, and that's we've been around for about 7 to 8 years now, and that's what makes it challenging. Azure comes with so many features every week in, week out, and we actually need to keep training people. So the way we're structured is we have projects, or what we call onboarding, and then we have continuous improvement. We don't call it managed services, it is continuous improvement. We onboard the customer, we make sure they have that warm bed in Azure, that one boss, and they land there, and then we go to continuous improvement. And what's also the responsibility of the consultants and the subject matter experts and the people who dive into the new technologies, because they are like on the front lines. They get confronted with new customers. That's the challenge with software companies, because you never know what you run into. They can do technology that you've never heard before, so you have to be really adaptive. And we need to transfer that knowledge, not just the project, not just the customer. We need to transfer that knowledge to our continuous improvement teams, and they are very, very passionate. And sometimes we throw a lot of new technologies at them, and they have to be adaptive as well. So that results in a lot of internal sessions and trainings and referring them to online content. And I have to say that I'm really, really proud of our continuous improvement teams, as the things we throw at them, the new projects, the new customers, the new technologies, for some reason, every time they figure it out, they adapt, and they find a way to improve the solution for the customer.
I like that you guys leverage the continuous improvement model. I think that's so important for companies. And I think it sets the right expectation up front that there will be some realignment and shift to create success in the technologies that you're helping them with.
Yeah, I think the key here is not just deploying infrastructure, but I might be a bit opinionated on that, but if you are a service provider and you just manage infrastructure, how relevant are you in 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years if everything's going platform as a service, cloud native? And with continuous improvement, having that as a focus, not just a name, but actually chasing people, all right, what can we do better at this customer? It makes their product better, but it also requires us to fully understand their business process. We don't just need to understand the infrastructure, we need to understand, if you sell something, if something happens, what is the customer impact? What is your roadmap in 6 months, 1 year? If we take steps back and we look at this week, what does it mean that we need to do this week to reach that goal next year? And that's what we do with our customers.
So let's just get to it then. You're working on some pretty creative projects right now. I don't want to take the excitement from you, but why don't you tell us about some of the very exciting stuff you're working on right now?
Yeah, so it's not just infrastructure. That's how we started, infrastructure, and then it's good to tell how do companies come to that exciting technology. And what I call exciting technology is things like IoT, machine learning, AI. How do you get to that? And it's software companies that go to Azure, go from that virtual machine, they modernize their front end, they modernize some backends, and then they're there. And what we see is they sit on such a big estate. They've got so much data, so much customer interaction. They've got devices on-prem. And what do you do with that? Do you keep developing that yourself, or do you use native Azure technology? And that's the process that we're seeing for the last year, and what we see growing this year, next year, and the years to come, is they will use the accessible technology like AI on Azure and IoT on Azure, because it just works out of the box. And that resulted in a lot of customers that either were already leveraging similar technology, but they could do better on Azure, or we can now approach them and saying, hey, you can do this on Azure. And that resulted in, you did a really nice tweet on the cow. We have a customer that actually incorporated IoT and AI with cows. So that means they can actually monitor the cow, and they can see temperature, movements, things like that. And based on all that data, you can see, hey, what's the behavior of that cow? If something happens, you have historical data. You can actually start predicting how healthy a cow is, or how good a cow works, or what can you expect from that cow. And that helps a lot of farmers going into more modern technology, but also help them be more efficient. And I think that's what makes IoT and AI that good. It's efficiency. It takes so much work out of your hands. It helps them be more efficient. And it's not just the cow thing. It's we've got companies that focus on value chain optimization in factories. So if you would order something, if you have multiple processes in your factory, and every step of that process needs a part, or every step of that process needs this amount of people and is expecting to take this much time, you can automate that if you have the right IoT technology, and if you have the right AI and the right analytics. that means that you can optimize that process and hey, let's say I'm making chocolate. Let's do that example of chocolate. I make chocolate. I need components for my chocolate, but it costs money to have a lot of stuff stored in your factory because that takes up space. You want to be efficient. So if you have all those components configured and you use things like AOI and IoT, you can actually predict when you run out of the things you need to make chocolate. So you know, hey, now I need to order this specific part to make my chocolate, and it needs to be delivered to that part, to that place in the factory. And that makes it really, really efficient. And we have customers that promise their customers, because software companies, their end users, they promise them 10 to 20% optimization by just using the product and the technology. And that's really amazing.
So this cow thing, is it similar to
Is it similar to what?
So is it similar to like a GPS tracking device on a dog per se? Because like this is my dog. So this is my dog's invisible fence collar thing. When she crosses the invisible fence, which is basically underground wire, she gets zapped. Now it does do a little bit of tracking in terms of how many times she gets zapped and how long and things like that. I believe the newer generation is actually able to track her GPS wise. Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious to see if it's something similar to this, where they can actually, track the cows. Let's say you have a rogue cow that wants to go somewhere. He's like, hey, I'm not part of the group. I want to do my own cow thing.
Yeah. Well,
I have a lot of cows.
It happens.
Well, they don't zap the cows though, but you have, well, they've got the wires for that, but no. So what you see, and it's not just with our customers, but there are many companies leveraging similar technology. It's a bit smaller than a watch because it needs to be attached to the cow, and it needs to. That's the biggest challenge, I think, for companies that build that technology. It needs to work for a long, long time. If you've got that watch, it will probably run out of battery within a week, so you need to recharge it. So it's actually really small chips, really small parts that some do GPS tracking. I know of companies that do it with GPS tracking. Some don't, but it's just when the cow walks back in, it starts analyzing the data. So it's more of it's more localized technology than it's actually connected to GPS, which is definitely possible, but that means you would need to either replace it, which might not be a happy thing for a cow. I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure how they implement it within the cow. I don't know, or you need to have a different technology.
It's interesting. It shows the power of data. And so I had to do it's been a busy day. I've been on camera a lot today. I did a webinar. This is my 4th podcast. But one of the webinars I did today, I did some research around data, and I see you being a huge contributor to this. Mm-hmm. Globally, this year, we're supposed to hit 59 zettabytes of data. And I'm thinking that with what your company is doing, that's a low number now. You're definitely doing your part to help contribute to that data, but you're doing some fantastic analytics with it, which I think is so important. It's revolutionizing how we can do many things in industries. You mentioned farming. Pumala, you mentioned how we're taking care of our pets and animals. I think the sky is the limit here on data.
Yeah. So are we? Yeah. Are you Skynet?
we should be. We're building it.
Here?
We're building it, I think. No, but it's just if you actually.
So are we at that stage though? Are we at that stage that we can say, like you just said, you're building it? Are we building Skynet? Or has Skynet already been built and we're just building the surrounding network for Skynet to take us over?
We're just making it smarter. Yeah. So the thing is, if you tell someone, hey, do you do IoT or do you do AI? Then people generally say, no, I don't know what that is. But if you start looking at the examples, and not just the success stories of the really big companies or the startups that started with AI, we've also got companies that work with smart locks. So the elderly people, they get home care and they've got a lock in front of the door. And then with IoT and AI and proper device management and a lot of technologies, the healthcare people can actually go to that door, they present their phone and they're being unlocked. And that also generates data. And what we're seeing is we definitely never stop. We started out as an infrastructure company, but what you see with those software companies is, hey, now you are there. What's your next step? And they start researching, and we start telling them about the amount of data that they have. And I think if you look at the data that exists and that's not being leveraged for AI and things like that, we still have so many things to do. It's people are sitting on so much data and they have no idea what they can do with it. And that's what will make it grow in the years to come, because I think a lot of companies are now there. They move to that public cloud and it's all accessible. It's just the click of a button. If I need an IoT hub, I click on it. If I want a data explorer, I click on it and I can just store my data with minimum latency. That just makes it so powerful. If you would do that on-prem, maybe you had the idea, but it was so expensive to implement. It was so expensive to build things that could do that. And now it's just a click of a button and it's there. And that's why I think it will grow really, really fast for the years to come.
So how are you, like, security-wise, compliance, regulations, though, obviously you're in Belgium for the EU, right? Yes, they are. I had to double check that. In terms of like all the governance that has to, go into play, how does that impact what you guys are doing and what your customers are doing? Is there any hesitation? I mean, obviously it seems like it doesn't seem like there's hesitation to use Azure or cloud services for this, but like I look at it from the outside, I'm thinking, wow, with all this data governance, you would think that there's some hesitation, but it doesn't seem like there is. And what are you guys doing, to make sure that data is secure and compliant and, everybody's happy?
Yeah, that question actually happened when people started moving to the cloud. And I think the biggest challenge there was, well, we're in the EU, so we have GDPR. How are you compliant with that? At first, I think the first year we started doing it, that was a big challenge. It was a lot of talking with customers. It was a lot of explaining how that works. How does data replication work? How does the whole jurisdiction work? So if you do West Europe, you can replicate in North Europe, which is also compliant with GDPR, or is in the same region as GDPR. So that took a lot of explaining, but fortunately the Microsoft documentation is really, really well on that. You've got things like a Trust Center, which provides all the details you need, but it was a lot of talking. And then it comes from convincing the customer to taking responsibility, because you're a managed service provider and they start doing things like storing a lot of data. So how do you deal with data compliance? And there are a lot of people that do audits and things like that, but that's just a piece of paper. How do you deal with the actual responsibility? So we really focus on telling the customer, hey, we deploy a landing zone, we deploy something in Azure. That means, is your customer base West Europe? We will configure Azure policies to remain in West Europe. We try to enforce everything technically, just have all those guardrails in place before they start deploying. Because if you don't allow them to do something wrong, then they won't do something wrong. But then you have the actual data, and that's what takes a lot of talking to customers, because they get excited. They have all those options. They get excited about deploying it. They get excited about using it. And then we really have to stress, hey, you're doing something. You're doing AI. You're building relations between two data sets. Can you actually do that? And that it's just a lot of talking and researching with customers. But we definitely take that responsibility to help them with that, because you can get excited, but sometimes you just have to hit the brakes, say, wait a minute, what are we doing?
But I mean, I've even seen you do that. And this is the one thing that I really respect about the Intercept team and kind of why I wanted to have you on here in addition to your cow story, but is that you guys all jump in with both feet, right? So I've heard, when you and I first started talking, you were working on Azure Monitor and then it was Azure Backup. And for anybody listening, follow Wesley on Twitter because you're constantly digging deep before you move forward with the customer. You're providing the code they need. You're digging into it yourself. You're providing information that you've created on GitHub so that you're not just trying to make sure that your customers are secure and compliant, but then you want to share that with everybody else. And I mean, I just saw that with, the Azure Cost Management post that you just did. I mean, you're taking it all, whether it's here's how to be safe with what you're spending to here's how you move forward in technology. And I feel like you probably had to do it at a more rapid speed with COVID. People are starting to think about technology a bit different. What do you think?
It definitely started speeding up. Definitely, because technology, it also forced a lot of people to modernize because a lot of things changed. So they started focusing on modernizing. Then they experienced, hey, maybe it isn't that hard. Maybe you don't have to have cold feet. So they move forward, which means a lot of work for us, but also a lot of research and technology. And I always think if you don't know how it works, you cannot sell it. So you have to dive into it. You have to know, because that's the thing with software companies, that what makes it challenging. You generally talk to someone who's been doing development for 20 years. Mm-hmm. They are the lead developers at that company. They will challenge you. And that means that the day before you have that meeting, you need to research what they are doing, what technologies are interesting, and how do they work. And that makes it. I'm not the data person. I'm about the technology that comes before, but then you need to include different people in your company that do know about the compliance parts, that do know about labeling data and what can you share, what can you not share. So it always takes a lot of work, but because you're passionate about it, it just works. But it's just a lot of effort.
But it's more than passion. It's deep education. I mean, you're hands-on. And I just had a conversation with another partner who was saying when their customers are finding that their on-prem environment is managed a bit differently or set up a bit differently in the cloud, you have that feeling of trust issues where you have to build that customer up to go, no, this is okay. It's different, but it is safe. It is secure. It is compliant. And that's where your education and technical depth comes in to help have that conversation, regardless of data. It's more about security. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And it's just, you have to do it. You cannot with what I always tell people is, hey, Azure has hundreds of building blocks. That doesn't mean that you need to try all of them. You need to find what you need. That's what we're here for. And then we explain that specific building block will give you this benefit, and this is how it works for you. And that means you need to change this in your code, and this is how you leverage it. And it's just, that's the responsibility that we take. And it's passion as well. And I was just like, if you figured something out, share it with the world. They will learn from it. They don't have to make the mistakes that you did, because honestly, a lot of the work I do means falling and getting back up. And if I can help someone from not falling and just falling somewhere down the line, you can just give him a heads up. That's worth a lot.
And that's Pumla. You even did a tech talk about, the guardrails and using the building blocks. You're on mute. It's only been a year of this, but yeah.
That's just 2020. Okay, I'm so sorry. That was 2020. It's 2021 now. Yes, I want to say a year and a half. I did several talks on guardrails, and when you go to the cloud, it's not just we're going to go to the cloud, right? And that's usually how people do it right away. But what you want to do is you want to go to the cloud with guardrails, put those guardrails in place so that you are in compliant from day one, right? You've got your standards in place. You pretty much, you're not going to break the law. You're doing the right things right away. You know how much you're going to spend, or you're planning for that. Little things like that, it's going to save you a lot of headache. And I think it's so underestimated how much guardrails really impact your operations and your business. And oftentimes it's too late, it's too late, right? It's like, oh, I just spent $100,000 in Azure credits my first month. It's like, yeah, let's put some guardrails in place. Hindsight's always 2020, and I love the fact that your company, is helping companies put those guardrails in place, because without guardrails, where would we be as a society if we didn't have laws? Because laws are guardrails, right? They're rules. That's all they really are, just rules and some policies. And without them, we would be this carefree, lawless society that does whatever. And we've seen all those zombie movies. We see what happens, and it's not fun. And in a way, the cloud can be like that.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, especially with AI and IoT. I mean, we've seen the Terminator series movies, okay? We know what can happen when Skynet takes over.
Well,
there's got to be checks and balances.
Yeah.
To make sure she doesn't, take us all out. Or my car, Scarlett, doesn't decide to just, blow me up. Because I have a Tesla. That's AI and machine learning, right? When I put my car in autopilot, it's the same thing. And every time I drive, it's learning, and it's sending it back to the mothership to say, hey, this is how Pumla Schmidt drives. She's not a very good driver. He goes off at the lanes a lot, How do we fix that?
Yeah, no, you definitely need those guardrails. It's the very foundation of Azure subscriptions. And actually, I started talking and speaking about guardrails after your blog post about 1.5 years ago. So that's where it came from my side.
Oh my gosh, that's so awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Oh, I feel like, wow, I did something. 2020. It just was
a lot of people.
Fire.
Yeah. Well, you made a good point, Pumla, even in what you said about cost. I mean, there's so many different elements of guardrails too, right? It's cost, it's security, it's many different things, but I've seen those costs get out of control too. And if you don't have somebody guiding you and making sure that,
it's the card, right?
Yeah, I mean, you'll be shocked. It'll be sticker shock. You won't know it until you hit that monthly bill.
I'm just gonna put my credit card in here. It's okay. We know how much we're spending at the end of the month. Yeah, it's that it like you said, it is sticker shock. That's like when you go on this, you go shopping at the mall, and you're having a good day. They're bringing you wine every time you go into the store.
Right.
Next thing you know, you go home and you're like, holy shit, how much did I spend on those shoes? Yeah, it's the same thing. I didn't have guardrails when I go shopping. It's nice.
I get the pictures to prove it. So if anybody has questions on Pumla's guardrails, we've got lots of pictures.
I have no guardrails. Actually, I have one card that actually has guardrails. I actually have limits that I can only spend $1,500 a day on the card. So that is some guardrails I have in place, but some of my other cards, no. And it would be nice if I could put those guardrails so that when I go into a store, I'm not dumping several $1,000s on just a couple pairs of shoes. And it's the same thing with the cloud. When we have those guardrails in place, we don't have the development team just going, let's spin up some test servers and let's put all the memory, and they all need SSD drives, premium drives.
But I mean, that's how many stories have we heard of people that accidentally spun up a VM and forgot about it, or somebody that used their ACM, not credit card, but calculator, and estimated it wrong, and their cost got completely out of control. So I think, say it again.
I said it's just a test, right? It's a test environment.
Right. And how quickly that can go crazy. I mean, I've had many people reach out and say, how in the world did I just spend all this Azure earned credit?
Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah,
I've done it. I've run my credits out. And
I run my credits out easily.
Actually, the guardrails shut my domain down, which was probably a good thing. I mean, it wasn't, right? Because I need my domain, but it at least stopped me from spending money.
Yeah, and that's also the challenge with things like public clouds. there is no limit. If you don't configure it, you just have to pay for what you use, and it just happens. It happens a lot.
You know what? It's interesting because it is real money you can't see right away versus on premises, right? It is a capital expenditure. You see it, you have the right, the PO for it is physically right there in your data center or probably underneath your desk. I mean, I don't know where you put your servers, but it's somewhere where you can go and you can touch it and hug it if you would like to. With the cloud, it's not like you can walk up to a Microsoft data center and go, I want to see those servers that you have my cow data in.
No.
I'm just going to go, no.
Right.
No, I've had scenarios where someone actually called, hey, why did my bill go up 10K? And then it was a database. And apparently someone decided, I need a faster database for testing, but then end of the day, 5 o'clock, you go home, you go to bed, and then you forget about it. And that's also partially, of course, the responsibility of a partner. We also monitor that. If we see a big increase, we're going to call them, hey, what are you doing? But stop. Why are you doing that? Do you really need that? But it's always, it's just, you always have to check it. It's such a big risk, and that's why you need those policies. If you run a SQL database with a specific tier, limit it to that. Implement the guardrail. Hey, if you want to deploy something else, it's going to be blocked because you just don't want that to happen.
But I'm also hearing a theme because of COVID, where a lot of people that had all of these different areas where people were kind of managing security in their Azure environment in different ways, they're now trying to streamline and structure it. So it is kind of driving security that we do need in those guardrails that you're talking about.
Yeah.
It looks like we are just about out of time.
That went fast. That went really
fast.
And I love this conversation. This is one, governance, but we're talking about learning. We're talking about Skynet and cows. I mean, it's a couple of my favorite things. So this has absolutely been great. So thank you for joining us, Wesley.
Yes,
thank you for having me.
Concerns?
Sorry?
Last thoughts. Comments, concerns, you don't like us, you like us. Cool.
I really love this. It brightens up your day in times of a lockdown. Just makes it really good. If I could share something with everyone, just look at what you're running right now. You've got so much opportunities in Azure. You've got so much things to do it more efficient. Just look into it. It's there.
I think that's the best advice to end the show. Wesley, thank you for staying up until midnight for us so that you could share your passion. I love working with you guys and what you're doing. I appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And next time, I expect chocolate. Okay.
I'll make sure you get some once we can get some.
That would be great. And some stroopwafels.
We can do that.
Is Belgian chocolate better than the Latherock? Is that right? Am I saying that right? The Latherock chocolate in Switzerland? Please help me, Thomas or Isadora. I bought I want to say close to $200 of chocolate in Switzerland when I was there.
Oh my gosh.
My goodness.
Swiss chocolate is really good.
Over by customs. They're like, what is all this? I'm like, it's just chocolate.
It's just my snack.
It's just my lunch snack. So yeah, we'll have to have a competition, and I'll be the judge. Thank you again, Wesley. Thank you, ladies. Everybody.
Bye, you guys.
Have a great
care.
Morning or night.